Hello friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. My name is Daniel Rourke, and I've been a trooper with the Florida Highway Patrol for 11 years now. Most of that time has been spent working nights on the southern routes, places where the darkness settles in thick and heavy, where the only lights for miles are your own headlights cutting through the humidity. I've seen my share of accidents, pulled over countless drunk drivers, talked down people standing on bridge railings at 3 in the morning. But there's one stretch of road that still makes me check my mirrors more often than I should, and it runs straight through the heart of the Everglades. Alligator Alley. That's what everyone calls I-75 between Naples and Fort Lauderdale. 78 miles of elevated highway cutting through sawgrass prairie and cypress swamps, with water on both sides and nothing but darkness beyond your headlights. During the day, it's tourist traffic and 18-wheelers hauling freight to the coast. At night, especially the deep night between 2 and 5 in the morning, it's a different world entirely. The air gets thicker somehow, pressing against your windshield like something alive. The saw palmetto and cypress trees lean in from both sides, and when your headlights catch the eyes of an alligator in the water below, they shine back red and cold. I was running solo patrol on a Tuesday night in late September, about 3 years ago now. My call sign was 641, and I'd been on shift since 11. The weather was typical for that time of year, humid and close, with the smell of rain always just about to come, but never quite arriving. Lightning flickered somewhere to the south, too far away to hear the thunder, just silent flashes that lit up the underside of clouds that looked like bruises. I'd already run 2 traffic stops that night, both clean, and I was heading westbound on the alley around mile marker 63 when dispatch came through with a call. 6401, this is dispatch. We have a report of a single vehicle accident, possible injuries, westbound I-75 at approximately mile marker 49. Caller reported a sedan in the median, no hazards visible. Can you respond? I acknowledged and made a U-turn at the next authorized crossover, flipping on my lights. Mile marker 49 would put me about 14 miles out, maybe 12 minutes at speed. The alley was empty that night, just me and the darkness and the occasional set of headlights going the opposite direction. I pushed the cruiser up to 90, watching the mile markers count down in my peripheral vision. The median here is just a gap in the elevated roadway, water and sawgrass below, and I kept my eyes scanning both sides for any sign of a vehicle or debris. Mile marker 49 came and went. No vehicle, no skid marks, no broken barrier, nothing but the same endless stretch of road I'd been on for the last 10 minutes. I slowed down and radioed dispatch. Dispatch 641, I'm at mile marker 49 westbound. No sign of any accident or disabled vehicle. Can you confirm the location? There was a pause, longer than usual, before dispatch came back. 641, stand by. Another pause, then a different voice, probably the supervisor. 641, we show the call came in at 2:47 a.m., reporting a vehicle in the median at approximately mile marker 49 westbound. Caller stated they saw a sedan, possibly gray or silver, appeared to have struck the barrier. Copy that. I'm at that location right now. There's nothing here. No vehicle, no barrier damage, no debris. Want me to extend my search radius? Affirmative. Check east and west, maybe half a mile in each direction. I spent the next 20 minutes driving slowly up and down that stretch of highway, spotlights sweeping both sides of the road. Nothing. The asphalt was clean, the barriers intact, the sawgrass undisturbed. It was like the accident had never happened, or like someone had already cleared it with impossible efficiency. Dispatch 641. Negative contact. No evidence of any accident at this location. 10-4-641. Thanks for checking. Probably a false report or wrong location. Probably. But something about it bothered me. The way dispatch had hesitated. The way they'd brought in a supervisor to confirm. I'd worked with these dispatchers for years, and I knew their rhythms, knew when something was off. This felt off. I resumed patrol, pushing the incident to the back of my mind. It wouldn't stay there. 3 nights later, I was running the same route, same shift. Around 2:30 in the morning, dispatch came through again. 641, we have a report of a single vehicle accident. Possible injuries. Westbound I-75 at approximately mile marker 49. I felt ice slide down my spine. Same location. Almost the same time. I checked my watch. 2:44 a.m. 3 minutes earlier than the last call. Dispatch 641. Can you give me details on the caller? Description of the vehicle. Caller reported a sedan in the median. Dark color. Appeared to have struck the barrier. Caller was continuing westbound and did not stop. Dark color this time. Not gray or silver. But everything else was identical. Same location, same scenario, same approximate time. I responded faster this time, already familiar with the route. I arrived at mile marker 49 at 2:51, lights cutting through the humid darkness. And just like before, there was nothing. No vehicle, no accident, no sign that anything had ever happened. I got out of my cruiser this time, walked along the barrier with my flashlight. The concrete was old, weathered by years of Florida sun and rain, but there were no fresh impact marks. No paint transfer, no scratches, no scuff marks. I checked the ground on both sides of the road. No tire tracks in the soft earth beyond the shoulder. No broken glass. No scattered debris. Dispatch 6401. Negative contact at mile marker 49. No accident, no vehicle. Can you play back the call for me? There was a longer pause this time. Then, 641. We're having some difficulty with the recording. There's heavy static. The call quality was poor to begin with. Can you make out a plate number? Vehicle description beyond dark sedan. Negative. The caller was... The audio is unclear. We can barely confirm the location. I stood there on the side of Alligator Alley at 3 in the morning, listening to my dispatcher tell me that a call had come in, but they couldn't really tell me anything about it. And I thought about the last call, 3 nights ago. Had they been able to hear that one clearly? Or had it been the same story? Static and poor audio quality and just enough information to send a trooper racing to mile marker 49 in the middle of the night. Dispatch, the call 3 nights ago. Tuesday night, same location. Was that audio also unclear? A very long pause. Then a different voice, the shift supervisor. 641. This is Sergeant Kowalski. Can you 1019? Return to station. Sarge, I'm in the middle of a call investigation. There's no call to investigate, Rourke. Clear the scene and return to station. I wanted to argue, wanted to stay and search more thoroughly, but you don't argue with your sergeant over the radio. I acknowledged and headed back east, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd missed something, that there was something at mile marker 49 that I wasn't seeing, or wasn't supposed to see. Back at the station, Kowalski called me into his office. He was a good guy, worked his way up through the ranks the hard way, and I'd always respected him. But that night, he looked tired, older than his 52 years. Rourke, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me. Have you been sleeping okay? Eating regular? Any personal issues I should know about? Sarge, I'm fine. Why? He pulled out a folder, opened it. Inside were printouts, dispatch logs. He turned them so I could read them. These are calls for accidents at mile marker 49 westbound I-75, all between 2:30 and 3 o'clock a.m., all reporting a sedan in the median. I looked at the dates. There were 8 calls listed. The 2 I'd responded to and 6 others. The earliest was from 14 months ago. The most recent was tonight. I responded to 2 of these, I said. What about the others? Different troopers. All found the same thing you did. Nothing. No accident, no vehicle, no evidence. So, what is it? A prank caller? Kowalski rubbed his face. We don't know. The calls come from different numbers. Sometimes cell phones. Sometimes they show as payphone locations that don't exist anymore. Sometimes they don't show a number at all. And the audio is always poor, always static-filled, always just clear enough to get the basic information across. That doesn't make any sense. I know. He leaned back in his chair. Look, I'm not saying you did anything wrong. You responded appropriately. But I need you to understand something. If you get another call for mile marker 49, I want you to acknowledge it, and then I want you to continue patrol. Don't respond. Don't investigate. Just let it go. Sarge, if there's even a chance someone's in trouble, there's no one in trouble, Rourke. There's never anyone there. All we're doing is sending troopers to chase ghosts. Ghosts, the word hung in the air between us. Kowalski didn't believe in ghosts, and neither did I. But 8 identical calls over 14 months, all with the same impossible details, all leading to the same empty stretch of highway, that wasn't random chance. That was something else. Is there anything in the records about that location? I asked. Any history we should know about? Kowalski closed the folder. I looked. There was an accident there about 6 years ago. Single vehicle, sedan left the roadway and struck the barrier. Driver was killed. It was late at night, around 2:30 in the morning. By the time another motorist called it in and we responded, there wasn't much we could do. What was the timeline? How long between the accident and our response? He checked another paper. Call came in at 2:47. First unit arrived at 3:03, 16 minutes. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. The calls we've been getting, they come in at 2:47. Yeah, I noticed that too. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us thinking about what that might mean. A driver crashes at 2:30. Someone sees it, calls it in at 2:47, but we arrive 16 minutes too late. And now, 6 years later, the calls keep coming. Same time, same place, same voice cutting through static to report an accident that's already been cleared, a driver who's already gone. What was the driver's name? I asked. Kowalski hesitated, then told me. Margaret Vinson. She was 43, lived in Fort Myers. Medical examiner said she had a heart attack while driving. Lost control, hit the barrier. The crash didn't kill her, the heart attack did. She was probably already gone before anyone saw her. Margaret Vinson. I repeated the name in my mind, tried to imagine her in those final moments. Feeling the pain in her chest, trying to keep control of the vehicle, knowing something was terribly wrong. Crashing into the barrier, alone in the darkness, with water and sawgrass on both sides and no help coming for 16 more minutes. Sarge, who was the first responder 6 years ago? He checked the file. Trooper named Stillwell. He retired 3 years ago, moved to North Carolina. What did his report say? Standard accident report. Vehicle in the median, struck the barrier, driver deceased on scene, Straightforward, nothing unusual. Except it wasn't straightforward, not anymore. Something about that accident had left an echo, a shadow that kept reaching out into the present, kept pulling troopers to mile marker 49 at 2:47 in the morning. I went home that day as the sun was coming up, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed too beautiful for the conversation I'd just had. I tried to sleep, but couldn't. Kept thinking about Margaret Vinson, about those 16 minutes between the accident and when help arrived. Kept wondering if she'd been conscious during any of that time, if she'd known she was dying, if she'd hoped someone would find her in time. 2 weeks passed. I worked my regular shifts, patrolled the alley, responded to real accidents and traffic stops and all the routine chaos of night patrol. I didn't get another call for mile marker 49, and I was starting to think maybe it was over. Maybe whatever had been reaching out had finally let go. Then, on a Thursday night, hot and still with a storm building somewhere to the west, I was approaching mile marker 49 around 2:30. I wasn't responding to a call, just passing through on my regular patrol route. The highway was empty, unusual even for this hour. No trucks, no cars, nothing but me and the darkness and the approaching storm. At exactly 2:47, my headlights caught something in the median. I slowed down, felt my pulse quicken. There in the barrier, maybe 30 yards ahead, was a sedan. Dark color. Looked like it had struck the concrete wall at a shallow angle. No lights, no movement, just sitting there in the median like it had materialized out of the humid air. I called it in. Dispatch, 641. I have a vehicle in the median, westbound I-75 at mile marker 49. Appears to be a single vehicle accident. Investigating now. Copy that, 641. Do you need backup? Negative. Stand by. I pulled up behind the sedan, activated my lights. The red and blue strobes reflected off the vehicle's dark paint, off the standing water in the median. I could see now that it was an older model sedan, maybe 10 or 15 years old, and the rear bumper was crumpled where it had hit the barrier. I approached carefully, flashlight in my left hand, right hand near my service weapon. The driver's side window was down. I looked inside. The vehicle was empty. No driver, no passengers, no personal belongings, just empty seats and a dashboard covered in a thin film of dust. The keys were in the ignition, turned to the off position. The interior had that stale smell of a car that hasn't been driven in a long time, mixed with something else, something floral and faint, like old perfume. I checked the rest of the vehicle. Back seat empty, trunk empty. The glove compartment held registration and insurance documents. I pulled them out, checked the name, Margaret Vinson. The registration had expired 4 years ago. The address listed was in Fort Myers. I stood there in the humid darkness, rain starting to fall in fat, heavy drops, and I understood. This was Margaret Vinson's car, the actual vehicle from 6 years ago, the one she'd been driving when she died. And it was here, at mile marker 49, at 2:47 in the morning, exactly as it had been the night she crashed. I keyed my radio. Dispatch, 6401, run a vehicle for me. I gave them the plate number, already knowing what they'd find. 641, that vehicle is registered to Margaret Vinson, deceased. Vehicle was totaled in an accident 6 years ago and should have been destroyed. Should have been. But here it was, solid and real under my hands. Rain was drumming on the roof now, turning the night into a wall of water and sound. Lightning flashed, illuminating the interior of the sedan for just a moment. In that brief flash of light, I saw something I'd missed before. There was someone in the driver's seat. Not solid, not quite there, but visible in that instant of lightning. A woman, hands on the wheel, head tilted forward against the steering wheel. Still and silent. The lightning faded. The seat was empty again. I should have been terrified, should have backed away, called for backup, reported what I'd seen. Instead, I stood there in the rain, looking through the window at an empty seat that had just held a ghost, and I felt something else. Sadness. Deep, aching sadness for Margaret Vinson, who had died alone on this highway and somehow couldn't leave it. Who kept appearing at 247, kept triggering calls, kept trying to reach someone who would never arrive in time. "I'm sorry," I said, though I don't know if I was speaking to her or to myself. "I'm sorry we were too late." The rain intensified, becoming a true Florida downpour. I went back to my cruiser, soaked through, and sat behind the wheel. Through the rain-streaked windshield, I could still see the sedan in the median. It looked less solid now, like the rain was washing it away. The outline was blurring, the colors fading. I checked my watch, 3:03. 16 minutes since I'd first seen the vehicle. 16 minutes since 247. I looked back at the median. The sedan was gone. Not driven away, not towed, just gone. The barrier was undamaged. The only evidence that anything had been there was the marks my own boots had left in the soft ground, already disappearing in the rain. I finished my shift and never mentioned what I'd seen to anyone. Wrote up a report that I'd checked mile marker 49 for a possible disabled vehicle and found nothing. Standard procedure. Nothing unusual. But I knew the truth, and so did Sergeant Kowalski, though we never discussed it. The calls kept coming sporadically, never predictable. Sometimes weeks would pass without one. Sometimes they'd come 2 nights in a row, always the same time, always the same location, always the same static-filled voice reporting an accident that we'd arrive too late to help with. I still patrol the alley, still pass mile marker 49 several times a shift. And sometimes, when I'm driving westbound around 2:30 in the morning, I slow down without meaning to. I watch the median, watch the barrier, watch for any sign of that dark sedan materializing out of the humid night air. I've never seen it again the way I saw it that rainy Thursday. But sometimes, when the conditions are right, when it's late and foggy and the air is thick enough to taste, I see reflections, shadows, the brief outline of a vehicle that shouldn't be there, visible for just a moment in the corner of my eye before disappearing when I look directly at it. And every single time my radio crackles with a call for mile marker 49, I think about Margaret Vinson. I think about those 16 minutes she waited for help that came too late. I think about how some moments are so terrible, so final, that they leave scars on the world itself. They become loops that replay endlessly, reaching out into the present, trying to change an outcome that's already written in stone. The other troopers who get the calls, they think it's a prank or a glitch in the system. They respond and find nothing and file their reports and forget about it. They don't know that they're being sent to witness something that happened 6 years ago, something that's still happening, that will always be happening at 2:47 a.m. at mile marker 49. I know, though. I know what I saw that night in the rain. I know that Margaret Vinson is still there, still dying, still waiting for someone to arrive in time. Still hoping that maybe this time, maybe this call, someone will get there before 3:03. Someone will reach her in those 16 minutes. Someone will save her. But no one ever will. Because it already happened. Because the outcome is fixed. Because some accidents can't be prevented. No matter how many times they replay, no matter how many calls go out into the night. All we can do is respond, show up, bear witness. Acknowledge that something terrible happened here and someone died alone and afraid. That's all Margaret Vinson wants, I think. Not to be saved, because she knows she can't be. Just to be seen. To be remembered. To know that someone cared enough to come looking, even if they arrived too late. So I keep patrolling. Keep responding to the calls when they come. Keep showing up at mile marker 49 at 2:47 in the morning, knowing I'll find nothing but empty asphalt and barrier, knowing that the accident I'm looking for happened 6 years ago and will happen again tonight and tomorrow night and every night after that until the highway itself crumbles away. That's my job. That's what I do. I respond to calls, even the ones that come from the past, even the ones that can't be answered, even the ones that lead me to mile marker 49, where the darkness is a little bit heavier than anywhere else, where the barrier holds memories of impacts that echo forward through time, where a woman named Margaret Vinson died alone and left something of herself behind. I'll keep going there for as long as I work this highway, for as long as the calls keep coming. Because someone should. Someone should remember. Someone should care that she was there, that she died, that 16 minutes made all the difference and we were 16 minutes too late. And sometimes, when I'm standing on the shoulder at mile marker 49 in the deep hours of the night, when the humidity is thick and the darkness is complete, and I'm the only person for miles, I swear I can feel her there. A presence, a waiting, a hope that refuses to die even though the person feeling it died years ago. I never told anyone about seeing her that night in the lightning flash. Never reported the vehicle with her name on the registration. Never admitted that I stood in the rain and spoke to a ghost. Because some things can't be explained in reports and documented with evidence and filed away in folders. Some things exist in the spaces between, in the moments that repeat, in the calls that come from nowhere and send us chasing shadows. All I know is this. When my radio crackles at 2:47 a.m. and dispatch reports an accident at mile marker 49, I acknowledge the call. I head to that location. I search the median and check the barrier and shine my flashlight into the darkness. And I never find anything. The worst shifts are the ones where nothing happens until something does. You spend hours in your cruiser, watching the same stretch of highway roll past, the same exit signs, the same landmarks, until your mind starts playing tricks on you. You see patterns that aren't there. You anticipate calls that never come. And then, when something finally breaks the monotony, it's usually bad, really bad. I'm Daniel Rourke, Florida Highway Patrol. Tonight I'm running I-4 eastbound between Orlando and Daytona Beach, a corridor that's busy during the day and surprisingly active even at night. Tourists heading to the theme parks, trucks making their runs, shift workers commuting between cities. It's rare to have the highway truly empty out here, which is why what happened that night felt so wrong from the very beginning. It was a Wednesday in early March, around 1:30 in the morning. The weather was mild, temperature in the low 70s, with a light breeze coming in from the east. Perfect Florida night. The kind that makes you forget about the brutal summer heat that's always just around the corner. I'd been on patrol since 10, had run a few routine stops, nothing exciting. Just another quiet shift on the 4 to midnight extension. I was approaching mile marker 114, that stretch of I-4 that runs through the middle of nowhere between the suburban sprawl of Orlando and the more developed areas closer to the coast. There's a section here, maybe 8 or 9 miles, where the highway cuts through scrub forest and wetlands. During the day, you can see it clearly, the thick vegetation pressing in from both sides, the occasional glimpse of standing water through the trees. At night, it's just darkness, a tunnel of nothing with your headlights at one end and more nothing at the other. My radio crackled. All units be advised. We have a report of a disabled vehicle on I-4 eastbound. Approximate location mile marker 118. Caller reports a sedan on the shoulder, hazards on, but the line was disconnected before we could get more information. I keyed my mic. Dispatch, this is 523. I'm 4 miles west of that location. I can respond. Copy that, 523. Caller ID shows a cell number, but when we attempted to call back, the number shows as not in service. Not unusual. People drop their phones, batteries die, reception cuts out. I acknowledged and accelerated, moving into the left lane to get past a semi that was the only other vehicle I'd seen in the last 10 minutes. As I passed the mile marker 115 sign, I noticed something odd. My GPS started glitching. The screen flickered, showed my location jumping around, then settled back. I'd had problems with the unit before, nothing major, just occasional hiccups. I made a mental note to have it checked out when I got back to the station. At mile marker 116, my radio started acting up too. Static burst through loud enough that I had to turn down the volume. When it cleared, I could hear other transmissions, but they were garbled, words cutting in and out like someone was flipping a switch on and off. I tried to call dispatch, got nothing but white noise. Tried again, same result. Cell service was dead too. I pulled out my personal phone, saw 0 bars. The screen showed searching for signal, and then just gave up entirely. I was 3 miles from the reported disabled vehicle, and suddenly I had no communications. No radio, no GPS, no cell phone. Just me and my cruiser and this empty stretch of I-4 with darkness pressing in from all sides. I should have turned around. Should have backed out of whatever dead zone I'd driven into and called for another unit to investigate. But the disabled vehicle was close, and someone might need help, so I kept going, watching my odometer count up toward mile marker 118. At 117, my headlights started flickering. Not the bulbs dying, just a momentary dimming and brightening, like there was a problem with the electrical system. At the same time, my dashboard lights did the same thing. Everything dimmed for just a second, then came back at full brightness. I passed mile marker 118. No disabled vehicle, no sedan on the shoulder. Nothing but empty highway stretching ahead into the darkness. I slowed down, used my spotlight to scan the right shoulder. Clean asphalt, undisturbed grass beyond. No sign that any vehicle had recently pulled over or stopped. I continued another half mile, then made a U-turn at the next authorized crossing and headed back westbound, running the shoulder on that side. Still nothing. No vehicle, no debris, no indication that anyone had called in from this location. My radio crackled back to life. 523 dispatch, do you copy? Dispatch, 523, I copy. Had a communications failure for the last few miles. I'm at mile marker 118, no sign of the disabled vehicle. Copy that, 523. Can you clarify communications failure? Radio went dead. GPS signal lost. Cell service dropped. All systems came back online just now. There was a pause. Then, 523, all units in your area are reporting normal communications. No other reports of signal loss. I looked at my GPS. It showed my location clearly now, right at mile marker 118 on I-4 eastbound. No glitches, no jumping around. Everything was functioning perfectly. Copy that, dispatch. Probably just an equipment issue on my end. I'll have it checked out. Negative contact on the disabled vehicle. Resuming patrol. I filed a report when I got back to the station that morning. Mentioned the communications blackout and the phantom disabled vehicle. Sergeant Kowalski read it, made a note about having my cruiser's electronics inspected, and that was that. Equipment fails sometimes. Calls come in with bad location information. Nothing unusual about either of those things on their own, but they kept happening. Over the next 3 weeks, I got 6 more calls for disabled vehicles on that same stretch of I-4. Always between mile markers 114 and 122. Always with incomplete information. Always with calls that came from numbers that were disconnected, or showed as not in service when dispatch tried to call back. And every single time I responded, my communications would go dark right around mile marker 116, and come back online around mile marker 109 or 120. The GPS failures were consistent too. Right at 116, the signal would start jumping around. I'd watch my position marker on the screen skip forward and backward, showing me as being miles from where I actually was. Sometimes it would place me in the middle of nowhere, off the highway entirely, out in the swamps or the scrub forest. Then it would correct itself as I approached mile marker 120. Other troopers were experiencing the same thing. I wasn't the only one responding to these calls, and I wasn't the only one having equipment failures in that corridor. We had 6 different patrol units checked out by mechanics. They found nothing wrong. The radios worked fine. The GPS units were functioning properly. The cell signal issues were chalked up to a dead zone, a gap in coverage that hadn't been there before but was clearly there now. Except it wasn't really a dead zone. It was more selective than that. Some transmissions got through. Some signals worked. It was like something was filtering the communications, letting certain things through while blocking others. And the disabled vehicle calls kept coming, always leading us to that same empty stretch of highway where we'd find nothing but darkness and silence. On a Friday night, 6 weeks after the first call, I was approaching mile marker 114 around 2 a.m. when dispatch called it in again. 523, we have a report of a disabled vehicle, I-4 eastbound, mile marker 117. Caller reports a dark sedan, no lights, line disconnected mid-call. This time, I didn't acknowledge immediately. Instead, I pulled over at mile marker 113, just outside the zone where my communications would fail. I sat there for a moment, thinking about all the times I'd made this run, all the times I'd found nothing, all the times my equipment had failed in exactly the same way. Dispatch 523. Before I respond, can you tell me if we have any history on this location? Any patterns in the calls? A pause. Then Sergeant Kowalski's voice. 523, return to station when you complete this response. We need to talk. That wasn't an answer, but it was answer enough. They'd noticed the pattern too. They knew something was wrong with this stretch of highway, and they'd been keeping quiet about it, hoping it would resolve itself or that we'd find a logical explanation. I acknowledged and continued east, watching my odometer tick up toward mile marker 116. Right on schedule, my radio filled with static. My GPS started glitching, showing my position jumping erratically. My cell phone lost signal, and I was alone again, isolated in a dead zone that shouldn't exist. At mile marker 117, my headlights caught something on the shoulder. A vehicle. Dark sedan, exactly as reported. No lights, no movement, just sitting there on the right shoulder with maybe a foot of space between it and the white line. I felt a surge of vindication mixed with unease. Finally, there was actually a vehicle here. Finally, I wasn't chasing ghosts. I pulled up behind it, activated my lights. The red and blue strobes reflected off the sedan's rear window. It was an older model, maybe 15 years old, dark blue or black, hard to tell in the darkness. Florida plates, but I couldn't make out the number from this distance. I called it in. Got nothing but static in response. Right, no communications. I was on my own. I approached the vehicle carefully, flashlight in hand. The sedan's windows were tinted, darker than legal, probably, and I couldn't see inside from the rear. No damage visible, no flat tires, nothing obviously wrong with the vehicle itself. As I moved up alongside the driver's door, I noticed something odd. The car was perfectly clean. Not just clean, but showroom clean. No dust, no dirt, no bug splatter on the windshield, like it had been detailed minutes ago. That was strange for any vehicle, but especially strange for one supposedly broken down on the side of the highway. I reached the driver's window, rapped on it with my flashlight. "Highway Patrol, need you to step out of the vehicle, please." No response. No movement from inside. I tried the door handle, found it locked. I moved my flashlight beam through the window, trying to see inside despite the tinting. The vehicle was empty. Driver's seat, passenger seat, back seats, all empty. No keys in the ignition, no personal belongings visible. Just an empty, immaculately clean sedan sitting on the shoulder of I-4 at 2 in the morning with no driver and no explanation. I checked the plate, ran it through my MDT, or tried to. The mobile data terminal was showing the same connection errors as everything else. No signal, no data, no way to run the plate. I walked around the vehicle, checking all the doors. All locked. The trunk was locked too. I pressed my face against the rear window, trying to see into the trunk area through the seats. Nothing visible, just darkness. That's when I noticed my dash cam. From where I was standing, I could see my cruiser about 20 feet behind the sedan, light bar still flashing. And I could see the dash cam mounted on the windshield. But the red recording light wasn't on. The camera should have been running automatically when I activated my lights. It always did. But tonight, right now, it was dark. I walked back to my cruiser, checked the dash cam directly. The power light was on, but the recording indicator was dark. I pressed the manual record button, nothing. The camera wasn't responding. I checked my body camera next. Same issue. Power on, but not recording. The SD card was in place, the battery was charged, everything should have been working. But nothing was recording. This entire interaction, this entire response to a disabled vehicle that had finally, actually materialized, was not being documented. No dash cam footage, no body camera footage, no radio transmissions, no data terminal logs. It was like this moment existed outside the normal flow of evidence and records. I stood there in the pulsing red and blue light, looking at a sedan that shouldn't be this clean, that shouldn't be this empty, that shouldn't be here at all based on the last 6 weeks of phantom calls. And I realized I had no way to prove any of this, no way to document what I was seeing, no way to call for backup or run the plate or request guidance. I was completely alone, cut off from every system and support structure I relied on, standing on a dark highway with a vehicle that raised more questions than it answered. I made a decision. I'd note the plate number by hand, walk the perimeter one more time, and then wait. Wait for my communications to come back online, which they would once I moved east past mile marker 119 or 120. Then I'd call for a tow, get the vehicle impounded, and let someone else figure out what it was doing here. I walked around the sedan again, memorizing the plate number. FHV 7429. Florida tags, current registration stickers based on the color. The VIN was visible through the windshield, and I noted that too. Everything by the book. Everything documented in my notepad since my electronic systems had decided to take a vacation. On my third circuit around the vehicle, I noticed something I'd missed before. There were no reflections. The sedan's paint should have been reflecting my flashlight beam, should have been showing some glint or shine, but the surface seemed to absorb the light, seemed to drink it in without giving anything back. And the windows, despite being tinted, should have shown some reflection of my cruiser's light bar. But they didn't. They were just flat, matte, like looking at a photograph of a car rather than an actual car. I reached out to touch the hood to confirm that this vehicle was real and solid. My hand passed through empty air. The sedan wasn't there, not physically. It looked solid, looked real, looked like I should be able to touch it. But when I reached out, there was nothing but empty space where the hood should have been. I pulled my hand back, felt my heart hammering. This wasn't possible. I'd walked around this vehicle 3 times. I'd seen it clearly. I'd written down the plate number and VIN. It was right there in front of me, solid and real and definitely present. I tried again, reaching for the driver's door handle this time. My hand passed through the door like it was made of smoke. No resistance, no substance. Nothing but air where metal and glass should have been. I backed away slowly, keeping my flashlight trained on the sedan. It didn't disappear, didn't flicker or fade, just sat there on the shoulder, looking exactly like a real vehicle, reflecting nothing and existing nowhere. My radio burst to life with a shriek of static that made me jump. Then a voice, distant and distorted. 523. Respond. Mile marker. Need backup. I keyed my mic. Dispatch. This is 523. I didn't copy your last transmission. More static. Then, not dispatch. Get out. The voice was wrong. Too deep, too distorted, like someone speaking through water or from very far away. And the words didn't make sense. Not dispatch. Then who was transmitting? Identify yourself, I said into the radio. Who is this? You shouldn't be here. The sedan's lights came on. Not the headlights or taillights, but the interior dome light. It glowed softly behind the tinted windows, illuminating something inside. A figure sitting in the driver's seat. I'd checked that vehicle 3 times. I'd looked through every window. It had been empty, absolutely empty. But now there was someone sitting behind the wheel, perfectly still, facing forward. "Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle," I called out, my voice not as steady as I wanted it to be. The figure didn't move, didn't respond, just sat there, hands on the wheel at 10 and 2, like they were waiting for permission to drive. I approached again, flashlight up, trying to see through the tinted window. The figure was definitely there now, solid enough to see even through the tinting. Male, I thought, based on the build, wearing what looked like casual clothes, sitting perfectly still, facing forward. "This is the Florida Highway Patrol. I need you to exit the vehicle now." Still no movement. I reached for the door handle, instinctively this time, forgetting that my hand had passed through it moments ago. This time my fingers closed on solid metal. The door was locked, but it was real. I could feel it. I rapped on the window with my flashlight. "Sir, open the door." The figure turned its head slowly, looked directly at me. In the reflected glow of my cruiser's light bar, I could see its face. It didn't have one, not in any meaningful way. There were features, suggestions of eyes and a mouth, but they were blurred, indistinct, like looking at someone through frosted glass or heavy rain. The face shifted as I watched, never quite resolving into anything I could properly see or identify. "Get back in your vehicle and leave," it said. The voice came from inside the sedan, but also from my radio, and also from somewhere else, everywhere at once. "This corridor's closed." "Sir, I don't know what you're talking about, but I need you to step out of the vehicle. We can sort this out, but you need to comply with my instructions." The figure turned its head forward again, returned to staring straight ahead through the windshield. Its hands remained on the wheel, perfectly positioned, perfectly still. "You're not listening," the voice said, coming from all directions now. "The corridor is closed. The road here doesn't go where you think it goes. If you don't leave now, you'll end up like the others." "What others?" "The ones who stayed, the ones who tried to understand, the ones who are still here, still driving, still trying to find their way out." My radio crackled again. This time a different voice, higher pitched, frightened. "Hello? Can anyone hear me? I'm on I-4, somewhere around Orlando, and I think I'm lost. I've been driving for hours and I keep passing the same exits, but I can't get off the highway. Every time I try to take an exit, it loops back to I-4. Please, someone help me. I don't know where I am anymore. Then another voice overlapping the first. This is Unit 427. I'm in pursuit of a speeding vehicle on I-4 eastbound, but I've lost sight of the suspect. I've also lost communication with dispatch. Can any unit respond? I don't know where I am. My GPS is showing impossible locations. Request assistance. More voices, dozens of them, all talking over each other. Drivers reporting they're lost. Troopers saying they need backup. Dispatchers trying to coordinate responses to calls that make no sense. All of them coming through my radio at once. All of them sounding far away and distorted. All of them describing the same impossible scenario of being trapped on a stretch of highway that won't let them leave. And underneath all of those voices, barely audible, was something else. A humming sound, low and constant, like distant traffic or wind through power lines. But there was a rhythm to it, a pattern, and the more I listened, the more it sounded like voices. Thousands of voices, all speaking in unison, all saying the same thing. The corridor is closed. The corridor is closed. The corridor is closed. I backed away from the sedan, from the figure inside it, from the cacophony of impossible voices coming from my radio. I needed to get out of here. Needed to get back to mile marker 119 or 120, back to where my systems would work and I could call for actual help. I turned toward my cruiser. There were more vehicles now, not behind me where I'd been walking, but ahead of my cruiser, stretching back along the highway to the west. Dozens of vehicles, maybe hundreds, all parked on both shoulders of I-4, all with their lights off, all identical to the sedan next to me. Dark, featureless, existing in that strange way that made them look real from a distance, but insubstantial when you tried to interact with them. And in each vehicle, sitting behind the wheel, was a figure. All of them facing forward. All of them with hands at 10 and 2. All of them waiting. They're the ones who stayed, the voice from the sedan said. They're the ones who tried to understand. And now they're part of the corridor. They drive it every night. Mile marker 114 to 122 and back again. Forever. I ran to my cruiser, yanked the door open, threw myself behind the wheel. I punched the accelerator, felt the tires bite into the asphalt, and launched forward toward the mile marker 119 and beyond, toward the edge of whatever nightmare I'd stumbled into. The parked vehicles flashed past on both sides. Hundreds of them now, maybe thousands, lining the highway as far as I could see, and in each one, a figure sitting perfectly still, watching me race past. My radio was chaos. Voices screaming and pleading and demanding help, all of them lost on this corridor that wouldn't let them go. My GPS was strobing, showing my location jumping back and forth between mile markers 115 and 118, like I was driving in both directions at once. Then, at mile marker 120, everything went quiet. The radio fell silent. The GPS stabilized, showing me exactly where I was supposed to be. My phone reconnected, showing full bars. And when I looked in my rearview mirror, the highway behind me was empty. No parked vehicles, no waiting figures, just normal empty highway with a few scattered headlights in the far distance. I pulled over, hands shaking, heart racing. I sat there for 10 minutes, trying to process what had just happened, trying to convince myself it had been real, trying to figure out how to report this in any way that wouldn't result in me being suspended for psychological evaluation. Finally, I keyed my radio. Dispatch 523. Go ahead, 523. Negative contact on the disabled vehicle at mile marker 117. I'm going to clear the scene and resume patrol. Copy that, 523. Sergeant Kowalski requests you 10 to 19 when you complete your shift. Acknowledged. I drove the rest of my shift in silence, avoiding that stretch of I-4, taking the long way around to cover my patrol area. When I got back to the station at 7 that morning, Kowalski was waiting in his office. "Close the door," he said. I did. "Tell me what you saw tonight." So I told him all of it. The sedan that looked real but wasn't. The figure with no face. The voices on the radio. The thousands of vehicles that appeared and then vanished. I expected him to stop me, to tell me I was hallucinating or suffering from exhaustion. But he just listened, nodding occasionally, his expression grave. When I finished, he opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a folder. A thick folder, stuffed with papers and reports. "This corridor," he said, "between mile markers 114 and 122 on I-4 has been problematic for 18 years. We have reports going back that far of communications failures, equipment malfunctions, and disabled vehicles that can't be found. We have troopers who've experienced exactly what you described, and we have no explanation. 18 years. Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Because we hoped it had stopped. We went 3 years without any incidents. We thought maybe whatever was happening had run its course. But 6 weeks ago, the calls started coming in again. And you're the 4th trooper to report seeing the vehicles and the figures. What happened to the other 3? 2 of them transferred out, didn't want to patrol I-4 anymore. The 3rd, Officer Jamie Garrett, insisted on investigating further. She went into that corridor at night with recording equipment, multiple cameras, everything documented. She wanted to prove what was happening, to capture evidence. And she didn't come out. We found her cruiser the next morning at mile marker 117. Empty. Her equipment was there, but every recording device had been wiped clean. No footage, no audio, nothing. And Jamie was gone. I felt cold. Gone, as in missing. Gone, as in we've never found her. That was 11 years ago. We've searched that corridor dozens of times. Used dogs, helicopters, ground teams. No trace of Jamie Garrett anywhere. It's like she just stepped out of her cruiser and vanished. Jesus. There's a theory, Kowalski said quietly, based on the reports, based on what people have seen and experienced. The theory is that this corridor exists in multiple states simultaneously. It's I-4, physical and real, and part of the road system. But it's also something else. A trap, maybe, or a junction point. A place where people who get lost on the highway stay lost. That's not possible. I know, but I've read the reports, Rourke. I've talked to the troopers who experienced it. And I've driven that corridor myself at night, felt the communications drop out, seen my GPS go haywire. Something is happening there. Something we don't understand and can't explain. He closed the folder. So here's what I'm telling you officially. Avoid that corridor when possible. If you get a call for that location, you respond carefully, you don't engage with anything unusual, and you get out as quickly as you can. Document nothing in your reports beyond standard procedures. We can't have this in the official record because it doesn't fit in any category we have. And unofficially, if you see those vehicles again, if you hear those voices, if you encounter anything you can't explain, you drive. You drive fast, and you don't stop until you're out of that corridor. Because whatever's there, it doesn't want us to understand it. It wants us to stay, to join all the others who are trapped there, driving back and forth forever between mile markers that don't behave the way they should. I worked I-4 for 3 more months before requesting a transfer. I couldn't handle driving through that corridor anymore. Couldn't handle the dread that would build up as I approached mile marker 114. Even during the day, Even when nothing unusual happened, I'd feel it. A weight in the air, a sense of being watched, a certainty that the road I was driving wasn't quite the road it appeared to be. The last time I drove through that corridor at night, I didn't see the vehicles or the figures. But I did see something else. Just a flash, barely visible in my peripheral vision. A trooper's cruiser parked on the shoulder, light bar flashing. And standing next to it, a figure in a highway patrol uniform, facing the road, watching traffic pass. I slowed down slightly, just enough to see more clearly. The figure turned its head to watch me approach. Even from a distance, even in the darkness, I could see that it didn't have a face. Just that same blurred, indistinct suggestion of features that could have been anything or anyone. As I passed, it raised one hand, not waving, just holding it up, like a warning, or a greeting, or an invitation to stop, to investigate, to step into the corridor that doesn't follow normal rules. I didn't stop. I accelerated past mile marker 120, past the edge of the dead zone, back into the normal world where my equipment worked, and my radio connected to dispatch, and the road was just a road. But I think about it sometimes, about that figure in the trooper's uniform, about whether it was Jamie Garrett, still there after 11 years, still part of whatever exists in that corridor, still trying to warn people away, or maybe trying to lure them in, to make them part of the pattern. I think about all those voices on the radio, all those people reporting they're lost. They can't find their way off the highway. They've been driving for hours or days or years, and nothing makes sense anymore. And I think about mile marker 117, where a sedan that isn't quite real appears sometimes, with a driver who has no face, who warns people that the corridor is closed. Closed to what? To normal traffic, to normal reality, to the possibility of escape once you understand what you're seeing. There are places in Florida where the land gives up and the water takes over. Not dramatically, not with cliffs or canyons, but gradually, reluctantly, until you're not sure where one ends and the other begins. The causeways are like that. Long ribbons of concrete suspended over water that's too shallow to sail but too deep to walk, connecting land masses that seem to float just above the surface like they're not quite committed to being islands. I'm Daniel Rourke, Florida Highway Patrol, and I've been working the Tampa Bay area for the last 6 years. Most of that time has been spent on the causeways and bridges that connect the barrier islands to the mainland. Stretches of elevated highway where the horizon is all water and sky and the pavement feels temporary, like the Gulf could swallow it any time it wanted. It's beautiful during the day, with sunlight sparkling off the water and pelicans diving for fish. At night, it's something else entirely. The Sunshine Skyway is the big one, the famous one. The cable-stayed bridge that spans the lower bay with its yellow towers and dramatic height. But there are smaller causeways, too. Lower bridges that handle local traffic, that connect neighborhoods and communities that exist in that liminal space between mainland and island. One of these runs from South Tampa across the bay to a small barrier island community, and it's maybe 3 miles long, elevated maybe 15 feet above the water, with a barrier on each side that's supposed to prevent accidents but really just marks the edge where concrete ends and empty air begins. I patrol that causeway several times a shift. It's usually quiet, just residential traffic and the occasional late-night driver, but we get calls there more often than you'd think. Disabled vehicles, minor accidents, and the other kind. The kind where someone parks their car on the shoulder, climbs over the barrier, and steps into the air. The causeway has a reputation. People who live in the area know about it. It's not talked about openly, not in the tourist guides or the real estate brochures, but it's there in the background. A dark knowledge that this particular stretch of elevated roadway has seen more than its fair share of despair. The barrier is 4 feet tall, easy enough to climb if you're determined. The water below is 15 feet deep at low tide, maybe 18 at high. Enough to be fatal if you hit it wrong. Enough to pull you under if you're not fighting to stay up. I've responded to 3 barrier jumpers in my time on this causeway. All at night, all alone, all at different points along the span. 2 of them I was too late for. By the time I arrived, all I could do was coordinate the search and recovery. The 3rd time, I was early enough to talk to her, a young woman in her 20s sitting on the barrier with her legs dangling over the edge. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing and everything, and eventually she let me help her back over to the safe side. I drove her to the crisis center myself, made sure she got inside, made sure someone was going to help her. I still wonder if it stuck, if that night made a difference, or if she just tried again somewhere else. The point is, I know this causeway. I know its rhythms and its moods, know how the wind whips across it on stormy nights, know how the lights from the mainland reflect off the water in patterns that look almost alive. I know this causeway, and I know when something's wrong. It started on a Tuesday in late October, around 11 at night. I was eastbound on the causeway heading toward the island when I saw a figure standing at the barrier. Not sitting, not climbing, just standing next to it looking out at the water. Male, I thought, based on the build. Wearing dark clothes, not moving, just standing there with his hands at his sides. I slowed down, activated my spotlight. The figure didn't react, didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge my presence at all. Just stood there facing the water, perfectly still. I pulled over about 30 yards behind him, keyed my radio. Dispatch 523, I've got a possible barrier situation on the causeway, eastbound about halfway across. Single individual at the barrier, I'm going to make contact. Copy that, 523. Do you need backup? Negative, stand by. I got out of my cruiser, left my lights running. The spotlight was still trained on the figure, and in its harsh white beam, I could see him clearly now. Tall, maybe 6'2" or 6'3", wearing what looked like jeans and a dark jacket. His hair was dark too, or maybe he was wearing a cap. I couldn't tell from this angle. He hadn't moved, hadn't turned around, hadn't done anything to indicate he was aware of me approaching. "Sir," I called out, keeping my voice calm and level. "I'm with the highway patrol. I need to talk to you for a minute." No response. The wind was picking up, coming off the water, carrying the salt smell of the Gulf. The figure's clothes didn't move in the wind. His hair didn't move. He was perfectly still, like a statue, like he wasn't quite solid enough for the wind to affect. I got closer, maybe 15 feet away now. "Sir, I need you to step away from the barrier, please." He turned his head slightly, just enough that I should have been able to see his profile. But in the spotlight's glare, his face was just shadow. No features, no details, just darkness where a face should be. "Sir, can you hear me?" He turned fully then, facing me instead of the water. Still no features visible, still just that shadow where his face should be. And then he raised one hand, pointing at me. Not threatening, not aggressive, just pointing. Like he was trying to show me something or indicate something about me specifically. I felt my hand drift toward my service weapon, not drawing it, but ready. Something about this situation was wrong. The way he moved, the way he looked, the way he didn't respond to any verbal commands or questions. This wasn't adding up to a standard barrier situation. "I need you to put your hand down and step toward me slowly," I said, using my command voice now, leaving no room for misinterpretation. He lowered his hand, but he didn't move toward me. Instead, he stepped backward toward the barrier. One step, then another, his movements smooth and deliberate. He was going to go over. He was going to jump, and I was too far away to stop him. "Sir, stop! Don't move!" He took another step backward. His heel must have hit the barrier because he should have stopped, should have encountered the concrete wall. But he kept going, kept stepping backward, and then he was on the other side of the barrier. Not climbing over it, not jumping, just stepping through it like it wasn't there, like it was made of air instead of solid concrete. I ran forward, reached the barrier in seconds, looked over the edge, down at the water 15 feet below. Nothing. No splash, no ripples, no sign that anyone had just gone over. The water was calm, reflecting the lights from the mainland perfectly undisturbed. I grabbed my radio. "Dispatch 523, I need fire rescue and marine units at my location. I have a jumper, just went over the barrier on the causeway." "Copy that, 523. Fire rescue and marine units responding." "Did you see him enter the water?" I hesitated. No, I hadn't seen him enter the water. I'd seen him step through a solid barrier and then disappear. But I couldn't say that. Couldn't explain what I'd just witnessed in any way that made sense. "Affirmative. He went over at my location, eastbound lane, approximately mile marker 1.7. Fire rescue arrived within 10 minutes. Marine units launched from the nearby station and were on scene 5 minutes after that. We set up lights, ran search patterns, had divers in the water. We searched for 2 hours, covering a half-mile radius around where the man had gone over. We found nothing. No body, no clothing, no evidence that anyone had entered the water at all. The dive team supervisor came up to me around 1 in the morning. "Rourke, I gotta tell you, we're not finding anything down there. Water's clear. This is good. We've covered the search area twice. If someone went in, we should have found them by now." "Keep looking," I said. "He went over right here. I watched him go." They searched until dawn. Found nothing. I gave a statement to my sergeant, described what I'd seen in the most conventional terms possible. Man, at the barrier, appeared distressed, went over before I could intervene. A standard barrier jumper scenario. I left out the part where he stepped through a solid concrete barrier like it was made of mist. They ruled it as insufficient evidence of an actual incident. Without a body, without witnesses beyond my own testimony, without any physical evidence, they couldn't confirm that anyone had actually gone into the water. They suspended the search and filed the report as a possible false alarm or misidentification. But I knew what I'd seen, and it bothered me, kept me awake during the day when I should have been sleeping, kept replaying in my mind every time I drove across that causeway, the way he'd moved, stepping backward through the barrier. The way his face had been nothing but shadow. The way the water hadn't reacted when he disappeared. 3 weeks later, I saw him again. Same location, almost exactly. Same time of night, around 11 p.m. I was westbound this time, heading back toward the mainland when my headlights caught a figure at the barrier. Same build, same dark clothing, same posture. Standing perfectly still, facing the water. I pulled over immediately, called it in. "Dispatch, 523, I have another possible barrier situation at the same location as 3 weeks ago. Same description of individual." "Copy that, 523. Proceeding with caution?" "Affirmative." I approached on foot again, spotlight beam cutting through the darkness. The figure turned to face me as I got closer, and just like before, there was nothing where his face should be. Just shadow. Just emptiness. "Sir, I need you to identify yourself." My voice was steadier than I felt. "Sir, this is the highway patrol. You need to move away from the barrier." He raised his hand again, pointing at me. Held it there for a long moment. Then he lowered it and began walking backward toward the barrier. Same smooth movement, same deliberate steps. This time, I ran forward immediately, closing the distance before he could reach the barrier. I was fast, covered the ground in seconds, reached out to grab his arm to pull him away from the edge. My hand passed through empty air. He was right there in front of me, solid and visible in my spotlight's beam. But when I reached for him, there was nothing to grab. Just air. Just space where a person should be. He completed his backward walk, stepped through the barrier again, disappeared. I lunged to the barrier's edge, looked over. Nothing. Just calm water reflecting the lights from the shore. Dispatch, same situation. He went over. I need fire rescue and marine units again. They came. They searched. They found nothing, again. This time the sergeant was less sympathetic. "Rourke, what's going on out there? 2 jumpers in 3 weeks, same location, same description, and we can't find any evidence of either one." "Sarge, I know what I saw. Both times, someone went over that barrier." "Well, the dive teams aren't finding anyone." "The water's not that deep, Rourke. A body doesn't just disappear. So either you're seeing things, or something else is going on that we need to figure out." I requested the dispatch recordings, listened to them carefully. The audio quality was fine. My voice was clear. My descriptions were consistent. But there was something in the background. A sound I hadn't noticed during the actual calls, but that was clear on the recording. A low humming, rhythmic, almost like breathing. And under that, very faint, what might have been words. I couldn't make them out clearly, but they were there, repeated over and over in the background static. I took the recordings to our tech specialist, asked him to clean up the audio, see if he could isolate that background sound. He worked on it for 2 days, then called me back to his office. "Rourke, this is weird. That sound in the background, it's not interference. It's not electrical, it's vocal." "Vocal? Like someone talking?" "More like multiple people talking. A lot of people all at once. I isolated it as much as I could." He played the cleaned-up audio. The humming was clearer now, and under it, hundreds of voices, all saying the same thing in unison. "Come back, come back, come back." I felt ice slide down my spine. Where is this coming from? Cell tower interference? Radio bleed over? He shook his head. "It's in your transmission. It's not coming from anywhere external. It's like it was right there with you when you made the call." "That's not possible." "I know, but that's what the audio shows." I started researching the causeway's history, looking for anything that might explain what I was experiencing. What I found wasn't comforting. Over the last 20 years, there had been 37 confirmed jumpers from that causeway. 37 people who had parked their vehicles, climbed the barrier, and stepped into the air. Of those 37, only 19 bodies had been recovered. The other 18 had simply disappeared. Dive teams had searched, marine units had patrolled, helicopters had run search patterns. But 18 bodies had never been found, had never surfaced, had never washed up anywhere. The water wasn't deep enough to hide that many bodies. There weren't any strong currents in that area that could carry them away. The Gulf is vast, but the search areas had been thorough, the efforts extensive. Those 18 people should have been found. But they weren't. I started noticing other things too. Small things that I'd overlooked before. The way the water looked different near the causeway at night. Darker somehow, like it was thicker than normal water. The way sounds carried strangely out there. Voices and engines seeming to come from directions that made no sense. The way my radio would sometimes crackle with that same breathing sound. That same chorus of voices saying, "Come back," even when I wasn't making a transmission. And I started seeing him more frequently. Not every night, but often. Sometimes eastbound, sometimes westbound, always in roughly the same area. Always standing at the barrier, always facing the water, always turning to point at me before stepping backward through the barrier and disappearing. Other troopers started reporting similar sightings. A figure at the barrier gone by the time they approached, or there when they passed, but vanished when they turned around to investigate, or visible in their rearview mirror standing at the barrier as they drove away, but not there when they backed up to check. The dispatch recordings from these other incidents all had the same background sound. That rhythmic breathing, those hundreds of voices chanting, "Come back." Sergeant Kowalski called a meeting. 6 troopers total, all of us who had reported unusual activity on the causeway. We met at a coffee shop off-duty, somewhere we could talk without it being official. "Okay," Kowalski said. "I'm not writing any of this down, and this conversation isn't happening officially, but I need to know. What are we dealing with out there?" We shared our experiences. The figure at the barrier, the way he moved through solid concrete, the way he pointed before disappearing. The voices on the radio, the 18 missing bodies. All of it came out, all the strange pieces that didn't fit together in any conventional way. "There's a theory," one of the other troopers said. Her name was Melissa Vaughn, and she'd been working the area longer than any of us. "I've talked to some of the old-timers, the ones who've been on this causeway since it was built. They say the barrier jumpers, the ones whose bodies are never found, they don't really leave. They stay here, tied to this place somehow. And what we're seeing, the figure that appears, it's all of them. All 18, or maybe more from before we started keeping good records. They're still here, still jumping, still going over that barrier every night." "That's insane," another trooper said. "Is it? More insane than a man walking through concrete, more insane than 18 bodies disappearing in 15 feet of water, more insane than hundreds of voices chanting on our radio frequencies." No one had an answer for that. "What does the pointing mean?" I asked. "Why does he point at whoever's there before he goes over?" Melissa looked uncomfortable. "The old-timers say it's a warning. Or maybe an invitation. They say the figure is showing you what's going to happen. Not to him, but to you. That's not comforting. It's not meant to be. The causeway takes people, Rourke. It's taken 37 that we know of, and it's not done. The figure, the pointing, it's the causeway reaching out, testing, seeing if you'll follow." We sat in silence for a while after that, drinking coffee and trying to process what we'd just acknowledged. That our causeway, our patrol area, our responsibility, was haunted, was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with traffic or weather or structural integrity. "So, what do we do?" someone asked finally. "We do our jobs," Kowalski said. "We patrol the causeway, we respond to calls, but we don't engage with the figure. We don't try to stop him. We don't reach out to him. We see him, we report it internally, and we move on. We can't save someone who's already been lost." That became the unofficial policy. When you saw the figure, you noted it, you moved on. You didn't approach, didn't try to intervene, didn't try to understand. You just acknowledged that he was there, that this was part of the causeway now, part of the landscape, as permanent as the concrete and the barriers and the water below. But I couldn't let it go that easily. Something about the figure bothered me beyond just the supernatural impossibility of it. The way he pointed, the way he seemed to be trying to communicate something. He wasn't just repeating his death. He was trying to tell us something. I started parking on the causeway during my shifts. Not right at the spot where he appeared, but close enough. I'd sit in my cruiser with the engine off, lights off, and wait, sometimes for hours. Most nights nothing happened. But sometimes, around 11 or midnight, I'd see him. The same figure, the same dark clothes appearing at the barrier like he'd stepped out of nowhere. And I'd watch. I wouldn't approach, wouldn't try to interact, just watch. And what I noticed was that he wasn't appearing randomly. There was a pattern. He appeared most frequently on nights with high wind, when the water was choppy and the causeway felt more isolated than usual. And he appeared in different spots, not always the exact same location, but always on the eastern half of the causeway, always facing the same direction, always facing the mainland. Not looking out at the Gulf, not staring into the distance, but looking back at the place he came from, the place he'd been trying to leave when he jumped. And when he pointed, he wasn't pointing at me. He was pointing past me, back toward the mainland, back toward whatever had driven him to that barrier in the first place. I had an idea, a terrible idea that I knew I shouldn't pursue, but I couldn't shake it, couldn't let it go. The next time I saw the figure, I got out of my cruiser. Not to approach him, but to stand at the barrier myself, to look in the direction he was pointing, to see what he might be trying to show me. From that spot on the causeway looking back toward the mainland, I could see the city lights, the sprawl of Tampa, the high-rises downtown, the residential areas spreading out in all directions. Normal city at night, nothing unusual. But as I stood there, as I followed the line of where the figure was pointing, I noticed something. There was a section of the city, maybe a mile inland from the causeway, where the lights seemed dimmer. Not out, but muted, like they were struggling against something. And the buildings there, the ones I could make out against the night sky, they seemed to shimmer slightly like heat distortion, like they weren't quite solid. I watched for a long time, and slowly I started to understand. The figure wasn't showing me where he'd come from. He was showing me where others were going. That dim section of the city, that shimmer, that was a place where something was wrong. A place that was pulling people toward the causeway, toward the barrier, toward that final step into empty air. I researched that section of the city, found that it had one of the highest suicide rates in the county, found that a disproportionate number of the causeway's jumpers had lived there or had connections there, found that there had been a psychiatric hospital in that area that had closed down 20 years ago, and that many of its former patients had gone on to take their own lives, several of them from the causeway. The hospital had been built on reclaimed land, filled in wetlands that had been dredged and developed. Before that, it had been part of the bay, shallow water that extended much farther inland than it does now. The causeway, in its current form, was built across water that had once reached nearly to where that hospital stood. It was all connected, the hospital, the land, the water, the causeway, a circuit of despair that had never been properly broken. The figure at the barrier, he wasn't just one person. Melissa had been right about that. He was all of them. All the ones who'd jumped and never been found. All the ones who'd left that section of the city and walked or driven to the causeway and made that final choice. They were still there, still caught in the moment of decision, still trying to warn others away. But warn them away from what? From jumping? Or from that section of the city where the lights were dim and the buildings weren't quite solid? I drove there one night, off duty, just to see it up close. The neighborhood was old, run down. A lot of empty lots and abandoned buildings. The street lights were working, but they seemed to give off less light than they should, like the darkness was more resistant here. And there was a feeling in the air, a weight, like walking through water that was trying to pull you down. I found the location where the psychiatric hospital had been. It was a vacant lot now, overgrown with weeds and palmetto scrub. But there was still a sign, rusted and fallen over, marking the spot. Bayview Psychiatric Hospital, 1962-2003. I stood there in the darkness, feeling that weight pressing down on me, and I understood. This place was poisoned, not literally, but in some other way. It pulled at you, made you feel hopeless and trapped, and like the only escape was to leave, to run, to find the nearest edge and step off. And the nearest edge was the causeway barrier. 3 miles away, 15 feet above water that didn't behave like normal water. Water that took people and didn't give them back. Water that held them, kept them, made them part of whatever dark current flowed between this abandoned hospital and that stretch of elevated concrete. I drove back to the causeway, parked in my usual spot. Within an hour, the figure appeared, same as always, standing at the barrier, facing the mainland, facing that dim section of the city where the hospital used to be. This time, I got out of my cruiser and walked toward him. I knew I wasn't supposed to, knew the unofficial policy was to observe and move on. But I needed to understand, needed to know if what I'd figured out was correct. As I approached, he turned to face me. Still no features visible. Still just that shadow where a face should be. He raised his hand, pointed past me toward the mainland. Held it there, steady and unwavering. "I understand," I said. "I know what you're trying to show me. The hospital, the neighborhood, the connection." He lowered his hand slowly. For a long moment we stood there, 20 feet apart, trooper and ghost, both of us on a causeway that existed between the city and the island, between the land and the water, between the living and the dead. Then he did something he'd never done before. He nodded. Just once, a slow, deliberate movement. Acknowledgement, confirmation. And then he turned and stepped backward through the barrier and was gone. I went back to that barrier, looked over the edge. The water below was calm, reflecting the lights from the shore. But in that reflection, I could see something I'd never noticed before. Shapes beneath the surface. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Not swimming, not floating, just standing there in 15 feet of water that should be too shallow to hide them. All of them facing the same direction, looking back toward the mainland, toward that section of the city where something had gone wrong so long ago. They were still there, all of them, everyone who'd ever jumped and never been found. Standing in the water below the causeway, trapped in that moment of final decision, unable to move forward or back. Just existing in that liminal space between the concrete above and the mud below. I reported it all to Sergeant Kowalski. Everything I'd found about the hospital, about the neighborhood, about the connection to the causeway. He listened without interrupting, his expression growing more concerned as I went on. "Rourke, what are you asking me to do with this information?" "I don't know. Put a warning on that section of the city. Increase patrols there. Do something to break the connection." We can't warn people away from an entire neighborhood because you think it's connected to causeway suicides. We can't explain that connection in any rational way. And we certainly can't tell people there are ghosts in the water under the causeway. Then what? We just keep letting people jump? We keep pretending we don't know why? He sighed, rubbed his face. "We do what we've always done. We patrol. We respond to calls. We try to talk people back from the barrier when we get there in time. We can't fix whatever happened at that hospital. We can't change the geography or the history or the fact that some places are just wrong. All we can do is our jobs." He was right, and I knew it. But it didn't make it easier. Didn't make it any less frustrating to drive that causeway every shift, knowing what was below the water, knowing what was pulling people toward the barrier, knowing that the figure would keep appearing and pointing and trying to warn everyone about something we couldn't fix. I still work that causeway, still patrol it several times a shift, and I still see the figure, maybe once or twice a week, standing at the barrier, facing the mainland. He doesn't point at me anymore. Since that night when I acknowledged that I understood, when he nodded and confirmed my theory, he's stopped pointing. He just stands there, watching, waiting, being a constant presence in a place that's become a collection point for despair. Other troopers see him too. We all know he's there. All know what he represents. and we've all learned to drive past without slowing down, without trying to engage, without letting ourselves think too hard about what it means that he's still there after all these years. The neighborhood near the old hospital is slowly being redeveloped. New buildings going up, old ones being torn down. Maybe that will help. Maybe breaking up that physical space will disrupt the connection, will free the ones who are trapped below the causeway water. Or maybe it will just spread the problem around, create new hotspots, new places where people feel that pull toward the edge. I don't know. All I know is that every time I drive across that causeway at night, I check the barriers. I watch for that figure, for that sign that someone else is about to join the others in the water below. And sometimes, when the wind is right and the water is choppy and the causeway feels more isolated than usual, I can hear them, all of them, everyone who's trapped down there. Their voices carrying up through 15 feet of water and over the barrier and into my cruiser. The Florida Turnpike runs the length of the state like a spine, connecting everything from Miami in the south to Wildwood in the north. It's a toll road, well-maintained, with service plazas and rest areas spaced out at regular intervals. These stops are supposed to be safe zones, places where tired drivers can pull off, use facilities, grab coffee, maybe catch a few minutes of sleep before getting back on the road. They're supposed to be normal, predictable, boring even. The Oklahoma Rest Area is not normal. I'm Daniel Rourke, Florida Highway Patrol, and I've been working the central corridor of the Turnpike for the last 8 years. My patrol area includes a stretch from Orlando down to Fort Pierce, and in that territory there are 5 rest areas under FHP jurisdiction. 4 of them are exactly what you'd expect. 24-hour facilities with bathrooms, vending machines, information kiosks, plenty of lights, and regular security patrols. Truckers use them, families use them, people on long drives stop for the bathroom and to stretch their legs. Okalumpa is different. It's one of the older rest areas built in the early 80s and showing its age. The bathrooms still work, the vending machines are stocked, the lights are on. But something about it feels off. It's hard to explain if you haven't been there. The air feels heavier, sounds don't carry the way they should, and even during busy travel times it's usually half empty when the other rest areas in the region are packed. People don't like to stop there. They can't always articulate why, but they feel it. That sense of wrongness, of being watched, of walking into a space that doesn't quite want you there. Local drivers know to use the other rest areas. It's the out-of-towners, the tourists who don't know any better, who stop at Okalumpa. And usually they're fine. Usually nothing happens. Usually. My first real incident there happened on a Thursday night in September, around 2:30 in the morning. I was running a routine patrol, checking the rest areas in my zone, making sure everything was secure. Okalumpa was on my list, and as I pulled into the parking lot, I noticed immediately that something was wrong. The lot was completely empty. Not a single vehicle. No cars, no trucks, no RVs, nothing. That was unusual, but not unprecedented. It was late, it was a weeknight, traffic was light, but what made it strange was that I'd driven past this rest area going northbound about 40 minutes earlier, and there had been at least a dozen vehicles here. I'd seen them clearly, had made a note that the lot was reasonably busy for the hour. Now it was empty. Completely, utterly empty. I parked near the main building, a single-story structure that housed the bathrooms and vending machines. The lights were on inside, bright fluorescent white visible through the large windows. Everything looked normal, looked functional. But the parking lot was wrong. I radioed in, "Dispatch, 523, I'm at the Okalumpa Rest Area, southbound side. Lot is clear, no vehicles present. I'm going to check the facilities." "Copy that, 523. I got out of my cruiser, Immediately noticed how quiet it was. Rest areas are never truly quiet. Even in the middle of the night, you hear trucks on the turnpike, hear the distant hum of air conditioning units, hear bugs hitting the lights. But here, tonight, there was nothing. Just silence, heavy and complete, like someone had turned off the sound. I walked to the main building, tried the door. Unlocked, as it should be. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, the only sound breaking the silence. The bathroom doors were closed. The vending machines lined up along one wall, everything in its place. But there was something wrong with the air. It smelled faintly of coffee, fresh coffee, like someone had just brewed a pot. But there was no coffee machine visible, no break room for staff. I checked the bathrooms. Men's first, then women's. Both empty, both clean, both showing no signs of recent use. The mirrors were spotless, the sinks dry, the floors unmarked, like they'd been cleaned minutes ago and no one had used them since. As I came out of the women's restroom, I noticed the vending machines. 3 of them, side by side. Snacks, drinks, and coffee. The coffee machine was the source of the smell, I realized. It was on, warming light glowing, showing that it had a fresh pot ready. But that didn't make sense. Rest area vending machines are maintained by contractors who come through during the day. They don't brew fresh coffee at 2:30 a.m. I approached the machine, looked at the pot visible through the glass. Full pot, steam rising from it, clearly fresh. I touched the glass front of the machine. Warm. Recently brewed, probably within the last 15 or 20 minutes. But there was no one here. No staff, no travelers, no trucks in the lot. No one to have brewed this coffee or to drink it. I keyed my radio. Dispatch, 523, can you check the security cameras for Okalumpa Rest Area? I need to see who's been here in the last hour. Copy that, 523, give me a minute. While I waited, I walked around the building's interior, checking corners, looking for any sign of occupancy. The trash cans were empty, the floors were clean, everything was in order. But that coffee smell was getting stronger, more pervasive, filling the space with an aroma that should have been comforting but instead felt wrong. Dispatch came back. 523, we're having trouble accessing the cameras for that location. System shows them as offline. Since when? Stand by. A pause. Showing last upload was at 2:14 a.m. Cameras appear to have gone offline at that time. I checked my watch. It was 2:47 now. The cameras had died right around the time I would have been driving past this location going northbound. Right around the time when I'd seen a dozen vehicles in the lot. Copy that. I'm going to check the exterior cameras manually. I went back outside, located the security cameras mounted under the eaves of the building. 4 cameras total, covering the parking lot, the building entrances, and the approach roads. All of them had power. I could see the small indicator lights glowing. But something was wrong with the lenses. They were fogged over, covered in a thin film of moisture that shouldn't be there in Florida's dry night air. I went to my cruiser, grabbed some napkins, returned to the cameras, and tried to wipe the lenses clean. The moisture came off easily, but underneath, the lenses were still clouded. Not from exterior condensation, but from something inside the camera housing. Like the moisture was on the inside of the lens, or maybe the lens itself had degraded somehow. I gave up on the cameras and walked the perimeter of the building. As I rounded the far corner, away from my cruiser and the main parking lot, I found something. Footprints in the sand that lined the walkway. Fresh footprints, multiple sets, leading from the parking lot toward the building and then just stopping about 10 feet from the wall. They didn't go to a door, didn't go to a window, just stopped in the middle of the walkway like whoever had been making them had simply vanished. I followed them backward toward the parking lot. They originated from a spot near where I'd seen vehicles when I drove past 40 minutes ago. 3 different sets of prints, 3 different shoe patterns, all leading toward the building, and all stopping at that same spot 10 feet from the wall. Dispatch, 523, I've got fresh footprints here, but no sign of the people who made them. Lot is still empty. Can you run the camera footage from 2 o'clock to 2:14 before the system went offline? Stand by, 523. I waited by my cruiser, watching the empty parking lot, trying to shake the feeling that I was being observed. The silence was absolute now, not even the distant sound of traffic from the turnpike. Just heavy, pressing quiet that made my ears ring. Dispatch came back. 523, we've pulled the footage, showing approximately 15 vehicles in the lot at 2:05 a.m. At 2:11, the camera image begins to degrade. Heavy pixelation, loss of color. At 2:14, complete loss of signal. What about the vehicles? Can you see people getting out, walking to the building? Negative. The degradation started before any visible movement. Last clear frame shows vehicles in the lot, but no visible occupants. I looked at the building, at its lit windows and empty interior. Somewhere, at some point in the last 40 minutes, 15 vehicles had left this rest area without me seeing them. The cameras had stopped working. Fresh coffee had been brewed. Footprints had been made by people who had disappeared before reaching the building. None of it made sense. I spent another hour at the rest area, checking everything 3 more times. The coffee in the machine stayed hot, stayed fresh, even though no one touched it. The footprints remained, leading to nowhere. The cameras stayed offline, and the parking lot stayed empty. Finally, I cleared the scene, filed a report noting equipment malfunction and possible staff error regarding the coffee machine. I didn't mention the footprints that went nowhere, or the 15 vehicles that had vanished. I thought that would be the end of it. A weird night, an unexplained incident. The kind of thing that happens occasionally in police work and gets filed away under strange but not actionable. But it wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Over the next 3 months, I responded to Okalumpa Rest Area 17 more times. Sometimes for routine checks, sometimes for specific calls about disabled vehicles or suspicious persons. And every single time, something was wrong. Cameras would be offline, always showing that same timeline. Last clear footage at 2:05 or 2:11, degradation, then complete loss of signal around 2:14. Coffee would be fresh in machines that shouldn't be brewing at that hour. The parking lot would be empty when it should be busy, or full when traffic patterns suggested it should be empty. And the footprints. Always the footprints. Different patterns, different numbers, but always leading toward the building and stopping at that same spot, 10 feet from the wall, like there was an invisible barrier they couldn't cross. Other troopers started reporting similar experiences. Equipment failures at Okalumpa, strange smells, the sense of being watched. One trooper reported hearing voices inside the building when he was certain it was empty. Another found a woman's purse sitting on a bench outside, packed with personal items including ID and credit cards, but the woman whose ID it was had no record of visiting the rest area and didn't report her purse missing. The anomalies weren't limited to late at night either. During the day, travelers would report feeling uneasy, would leave their cars only to immediately get back in and drive away. Truck drivers who'd been using the turnpike for years started skipping Okalumpa entirely, choosing to drive an extra 30 miles to the next rest area rather than stop there. The Department of Transportation investigated. They replaced all the cameras, checked the electrical systems, brought in contractors to inspect the building and the grounds. Everything came back normal. No structural issues, no electrical problems, no environmental hazards. The facility was safe and functional in every measurable way. But the problems continued. I became obsessed with figuring out what was happening there. I started keeping a log of every anomaly, every strange occurrence, every report from other troopers or travelers. I mapped the footprint locations, documented the camera failures, tracked the patterns of when the parking lot would be inexplicably empty or full, and I found something. A pattern in the timeline. The camera failures always happened at the same time, 2:14 a.m., give or take a minute. The coffee would brew around 2:30. The parking lot anomalies would occur between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock a.m. It was like there was a window, a specific hour each night when something went wrong at Okalumpa. I researched the history of the location, found that before it was a rest area, it had been a turnpike service plaza with gas pumps and a restaurant. That closed in the late 70s. Before that, it had been nothing, just scrubland next to the highway. Nothing dramatic, no tragic events, no buried cemetery or historical trauma. Just empty land that had been developed, abandoned, and developed again. But then I found something in the local archives. A news article from 1981, shortly after the current rest area opened. A family had stopped there, parents and 2 kids, on their way to Disney World. They went inside to use the bathrooms. The father came out after a few minutes. His wife and kids didn't. He went back in to check on them, found the bathrooms empty, searched the building, searched the parking lot, called the police. They were never found. Mother and 2 children vanished from a rest area in the middle of the night. No witnesses, no evidence of foul play, no leads. The investigation went cold after 6 months. The family was listed as missing, and that was that. I kept reading, found that it had happened before and it had happened since. Not frequently, maybe once every few years, but there was a pattern. People stopping at Okalumpa, going into the building, and never coming back out. Not in any dramatic way, not all at once, just individuals or small groups who disappeared and were never found. The most recent case was from 3 years ago. A truck driver had called his dispatcher from the rest area at 2:06 a.m., said he was taking a break, would be back on the road in 30 minutes. He never checked in again. His truck was found at the rest area the next morning, keys in the ignition, CB radio still on, driver's door open. The driver was gone. I took all of this to Sergeant Kowalski, laid out the patterns, the history, the evidence that something was fundamentally wrong with Okalumpa rest area. He listened carefully, reviewed the documentation I'd compiled. Then he sighed and closed the folder. "Rourke, what do you want me to do with this? Close down a rest area because people feel uncomfortable there, because cameras fail and coffee brews when it shouldn't? People are disappearing, Sarge. People disappear all the time. From rest areas, from parking lots, from their own homes. Most of them turn up eventually. The ones that don't, we usually find explanations. Foul play, voluntary disappearance, accidents. There's no evidence that Okalumpa is any more dangerous than any other rest stop. Then explain the cameras. Explain the footprints. Explain why it's always the same time frame, always the same strange occurrences." He couldn't. Nobody could. But without concrete evidence, without bodies or crime scenes or clear explanations, there was nothing we could do officially. So I did something unofficially. I started parking at Okalumpa during that window, 2 o'clock to 3 a.m., watching and waiting. I wouldn't go inside, wouldn't interact, just observe. Document. Try to see what was happening when the cameras failed and the coffee brewed and people vanished. The first few nights, nothing happened. The rest area was quiet, normal, boring. But on the 4th night, I saw them. It was 2:11 a.m. I was parked at the far end of the lot, lights off, just watching. The parking lot was empty except for my cruiser. Then, in the span of maybe 30 seconds, vehicles appeared. Not driving in, not pulling off the turnpike, just appearing. One moment, the lot was empty. The next, there were 12 or 15 cars and trucks scattered across the parking spaces. I grabbed my radio, started to call it in, then stopped, because the vehicles weren't quite right. They were old, all of them. Models from the 80s and 90s, some even older, and they had that same quality I'd noticed in other situations. That slight shimmer, that sense of not being entirely solid. Doors opened. People got out. Families, truck drivers, solo travelers. They looked real, looked normal, looked like any group of people you'd see at a rest area. They walked toward the building, talking to each other, stretching after long drives, behaving exactly like tired travelers should behave. And then, as they reached that spot 10 feet from the building's wall, they vanished. Not all at once, but one by one, fading out like someone was turning down their opacity. The last to disappear was a woman holding a child's hand. She looked around, seemed confused, seemed to realize something was wrong. Then she was gone, and the parking lot was empty again. The vehicles remained for another few minutes. Then they faded too, disappearing one by one until the lot was empty and silent, and I was alone. I checked my dash cam. Nothing. The camera had recorded the empty parking lot, then static for about 90 seconds. Then the empty parking lot again. Whatever I'd seen, whatever had happened, hadn't been captured on video. I got out of my cruiser, walked to the building. Inside, I could smell fresh coffee. The vending machine showed a full pot, steam rising. And on the floor, leading toward the bathrooms, were wet footprints. Not mud or dirt, just water, like someone had stepped in a puddle. The prints led to the bathroom doors and stopped. I checked the bathrooms. Empty, dry, no sign of water or recent use. But the footprints were there in the hallway, visible and wet, evidence of people who had been there and were now gone. I sat outside until dawn, thinking about what I'd witnessed. Trying to understand. Trying to find a rational explanation for vehicles that appeared and disappeared. For people who walked into a rest area and never came out. For a place that seemed to exist in multiple time periods at once. I didn't find an explanation, but I did realize something. Okalumpa wasn't dangerous in any conventional sense. It wasn't pulling people in, wasn't hunting them, wasn't malevolent. It was just broken. Somehow, at some point, this location had become unstuck in time. The people I'd seen, they weren't ghosts exactly. They were travelers from years ago, from decades ago, still stopping at this rest area, still walking toward that building, still trying to use facilities that no longer existed in quite the same way. And when they reached that spot 10 feet from the wall, they crossed over into somewhere else. Another time, another version of this place. They were still here, but they were also somewhere else, and they didn't know they'd disappeared. To them, everything was normal. They'd stopped at a rest area, used the facilities, bought some coffee, and gotten back on the road. But to us, in this time, they'd vanished. Just like the family in 1981. Just like the truck driver 3 years ago. Just like all the others who'd stopped at Okalumpa at the wrong time and taken that final step toward the building. I stopped patrolling Okalumpa after that night. Requested a route change. Got assigned to a different corridor. I couldn't handle it anymore. Couldn't handle knowing that people were disappearing into some crack in time, and there was nothing I could do to stop it, or save them, or even warn them properly. Other troopers still patrol it. Still do routine checks, still respond to calls. And every few years, someone else disappears. Sometimes during that 2 to 3 a.m. window, sometimes at other times. The pattern is loose enough, infrequent enough, that it's hard to prove. Hard to take action on. The rest area stays open. Travelers still stop there, though fewer than at other locations. The cameras still fail between 2:11 and 2:14 every night. The coffee still brews in machines that should be dormant. The footprints still appear, leading to nowhere. And somewhere, in some other time or version of this place, people are still stopping at Okalumpa Rest Area. Still getting out of their cars, still walking toward the building, still thinking they're just taking a quick break before getting back on the road. They don't know they've disappeared. Don't know they've crossed over into something that isn't quite here or there, but somewhere in between. They think they're just stretching their legs, using the bathroom, grabbing some coffee. And then they get back in their cars, or they think they do, and they drive away, or they think they do. But they never reach their destinations. They never check in with worried family members. They never show up for their meetings or their vacations or their jobs. They're just gone, trapped in a loop of stopping and leaving that plays out over and over in a rest area that can't seem to stay in one time period, that bleeds across decades, that takes people from multiple eras and gathers them in that moment when they walk toward a building and take that final step into whatever lies beyond the point where their footprints stop. I drive past Okalumpa sometimes on my way to other assignments, other patrol areas. I see it from the turnpike, see its lights, see the occasional vehicle parked in the lot. And I wonder who's there tonight. Wonder if they're real, solid, existing in the same timeline as me, or if they're from some other year, some other era, stopping at a rest area that doesn't exist in their present but somehow still pulls them in. I wonder if they'll make it out, if they'll use the bathrooms and buy their coffee and get back on the road and drive safely to wherever they're going, or if they'll take that step, cross that invisible barrier 10 feet from the building, and disappear into whatever version of this place their timeline intersects with. I don't stop there anymore, never will again, because I know now that Okalumpa Rest Area isn't really a rest area at all. It's a junction point, a place where time doesn't flow the way it should, where decades overlap and people from different eras walk the same paths without ever knowing they're sharing space with travelers who've been gone for years or haven't arrived yet. It's a trap, but not a cruel one, just a broken one. A malfunction in the way places and times connect to each other. And anyone who stops there during that window, anyone who walks toward that building and crosses that invisible line, they become part of it, part of the loop, part of the endless cycle of arrival and departure that plays out night after night in a place that can't quite figure out when it is. The Florida Keys are a string of islands connected by 42 bridges and 113 miles of highway that feels more like an ocean crossing than a road trip. US 1 runs the entire length from Key Largo to Key West, sometimes so close to the water that spray from waves reaches the pavement. During the day, it's beautiful, postcard perfect, water on both sides in shades of blue and green that seem impossible. At night, it's something else. At night, you're suspended over darkness, with nothing but your headlights and the white line, and the knowledge that 15 feet on either side of you is water deep enough to swallow a car without a trace. I'm Daniel Rourke, Florida Highway Patrol, and I've been working the Keys for the last 4 years. It's a different kind of patrol than the mainland. Different rhythm, different challenges. You're dealing with tourists who don't understand the road, locals who drive it too fast because they know every curve, drunk boaters trying to drive home, storms that come out of nowhere and turn the highway into a water crossing. And you're always aware that you're on an island, or a series of islands, and if something goes wrong, your backup is 20 miles away and has to cross the same bridges you're on. Most of the serious incidents happen on the bridges. That's where the road is most exposed, most vulnerable, where drivers lose control and go through the barrier into the water, where rescue becomes complicated, where minutes matter in ways they don't on the mainland. We train for water accidents, practice the procedures, coordinate with the Coast Guard and Marine units. But training doesn't prepare you for everything. Doesn't prepare you for the things that don't make sense, that don't follow the rules of how accidents and vehicles and physics are supposed to work. It started on a Friday night in February, around 2:30 in the morning. I was running patrol on the lower keys, somewhere between Big Pine Key and Sugarloaf Key. Traffic was light, maybe 1 or 2 vehicles every 15 minutes. The weather was clear, temperature in the low 70s, gentle wind coming off the Gulf. Perfect night for driving, perfect night for patrolling. I was approaching the bridge between islands, one of the newer spans, when dispatch came through. 523, we have a report of a speeding vehicle, white sedan, no lights, southbound on US 1 in your area. Caller reports the vehicle passed them doing at least 90. Copy that, dispatch. I'm southbound near mile marker 15. I'll watch for it. I slowed slightly, moved to the right lane, watching my mirrors and the road ahead. A minute passed, then 2. Then I saw headlights in my rear view, approaching fast, very fast. I checked my speed, 65. The lights behind me were closing rapidly, had to be doing 90 plus. The vehicle blew past me on the left and I got a clear look. White sedan, older model, maybe 15 years old. No plates visible, no lights except the headlights. No tail lights, no running lights, nothing. Just the headlights cutting through the darkness and the white body of the car. I hit my lights and siren, accelerated to pursue. The sedan didn't slow, didn't react, just maintained its speed. We were on the bridge now, elevated maybe 20 feet above the water. The safety barriers on both sides looking thin and inadequate in my headlights. I radioed in. Dispatch, 523, I'm in pursuit of the white sedan, southbound on US 1, currently on the bridge between Big Pine and Sugarloaf. Vehicle is not yielding, estimated speed 95. Copy that, 523. No other units available in your area. Proceed with caution. I pushed the cruiser harder, trying to close the gap. We crested the peak of the bridge, started down the far side toward Sugarloaf Key. The sedan was maybe 100 yards ahead, maintaining its speed, showing no signs of stopping or even slowing. Then it vanished. Not gradually, not like it drove away or turned off, just gone. 1 second I was looking at its taillights. Wait, no, it didn't have taillights. Just the white body reflecting my headlights, and then it wasn't there. Empty road ahead. Nothing but darkness and the white line disappearing into the distance. I slowed, checked my mirrors, checked both sides of the bridge. No skid marks, no barrier damage, no sign that the sedan had gone over the side. It had simply disappeared from the road in front of me. Dispatch, 523, I've lost visual on the vehicle. It was directly ahead of me on the bridge and now it's gone. Negative on any accident or loss of control. The vehicle just isn't there anymore. A pause. Then, 523, can you clarify? Did the vehicle exit the roadway? Negative. There are no exits on this bridge. The vehicle was ahead of me, and then it wasn't. I'm stopping to check for barrier damage or accident signs. I pulled over, activated my spotlight, walked the stretch of bridge where I'd last seen the sedan. The barriers were intact, undamaged. The road surface was clean, no skid marks, no debris. The water below was calm, dark, showing no signs of disturbance. I searched for 20 minutes, found nothing. Finally, reported to dispatch that the vehicle had apparently left my visual range and I was resuming patrol. But I knew what I'd seen. I'd been watching that sedan, had it clearly in my sight, and it had vanished in the span of maybe 2 seconds. Not turned off, not driven into the water, just ceased to exist on that bridge. I drove the rest of my shift uneasy, jumping at every set of headlights, every white vehicle. When I got back to the station, I filed a report describing the pursuit and the loss of visual contact. I didn't mention that the vehicle had disappeared in front of me. I said I'd lost sight of it on the bridge, which was technically true, and left it at that. 2 weeks later, I got a call from another trooper, Marcus Vaughn, who worked the Keys night shift on his rotation. He wanted to meet for coffee on our overlapping time between shifts. Said he had something to talk about. We met at a diner in Marathon. Marcus looked tired, stressed in a way that went beyond just working nights. He ordered coffee, black, and got right to it. "You had a pursuit 2 weeks ago. White sedan, no plates, disappeared on the bridge." I felt my stomach drop. "How do you know about that?" "Because I've seen it too. 3 times in the last 6 months. Same vehicle, same behavior, speeds past doing 90 or more, no lights except headlights, and then it just vanishes. Usually on bridges, sometimes on the straighter sections between islands. Did you report it?" "The first time, yes. Got the same response you probably did. Investigated the area, found nothing. Assumed the vehicle had somehow gotten away. The second time, I was more cautious in my report. The third time, I didn't report it at all because I knew how it would sound. So, what are we dealing with?" He pulled out a folder, spread some papers on the table between us. "I did some research, talked to older troopers, guys who've been working the Keys for 20 years or more. This has been happening for at least that long. White sedan, no plates, excessive speed, disappears before you can catch it. Always at night, always between 2 and 4 a.m., always in the same general area of the lower and middle Keys. Has anyone ever caught it? Pulled it over? One guy claims he did about 15 years ago. Trooper named Stillman, retired now, living in Georgia. I called him, asked about it. He said he managed to box it in at a toll plaza, force it to stop. Got out of his cruiser to approach, and the sedan was empty. No driver, no passengers, just an empty car. While he was looking inside, his dash cam shut off. When he turned around to check his cruiser, the sedan was gone. Just drove away or disappeared, he couldn't tell which. He never reported it officially, just made a note in his personal log and tried to forget about it. Why are you telling me this?" Marcus looked at me seriously. "Because it's getting more frequent. Used to be once or twice a year, different troopers seeing it. Now it's happening multiple times a month. Something's changed, something's escalating, and I think we need to figure out what it is before it becomes a bigger problem." "What kind of problem?" "The kind where someone tries too hard to catch it. Where someone follows it too closely, tries to understand it instead of letting it go. The kind where a trooper doesn't come back from a pursuit." Over the next month, Marcus and I coordinated our shifts when we could, both of us watching for the white sedan. I saw it twice more, both times exhibiting the same behavior. Excessive speed, no plates, no taillights, disappearing on bridges. Marcus saw it once, got closer than before, close enough to see that there was no driver visible in the vehicle. Just an empty driver's seat, steering wheel turning on its own, car maintaining perfect control at 90 miles per hour. We weren't the only ones. 4 other troopers reported similar sightings, though most were reluctant to put it in official reports. The white sedan was becoming an open secret among the night shift troopers in the Keys. Everyone had seen it or knew someone who had. Everyone knew it wasn't a normal vehicle, wasn't following normal rules. Then Marcus stopped responding to my calls. I tried his cell, his personal phone, his work radio, nothing. I checked with dispatch, they said he'd called in sick, would be out for a few days. I drove to his apartment, knocked, got no answer. His car was there, his lights were off, but he wasn't responding. I called his sergeant, who told me Marcus had requested a week off for personal reasons. Said he was fine, just needed some time. But something about it felt wrong. Marcus had been obsessed with figuring out the sedan, had been getting closer to it, had been determined to understand what it was, and now he was suddenly unavailable, suddenly silent, suddenly gone. I gave it 3 days, then went back to his apartment. This time the door was unlocked. I went inside, calling Marcus's name. The apartment was empty, looked lived in but abandoned. Coffee cup on the table, TV remote on the couch, bed unmade. Like he'd stepped out for just a minute and never came back. On his kitchen table, I found his notes, the folder he'd shown me at the diner, plus pages and pages of additional research. Maps of the keys with red marks indicating sighting locations. Timelines of when the sedan had appeared. Witness statements from retired troopers and longtime residents who'd seen it over the years. And a final note, dated 3 days ago, the night before Marcus stopped responding. I think I've figured out where it's going. There's a pattern in the locations, always between the same 2 bridges, always heading south. I'm going to follow it tonight, see if I can track it to wherever it's trying to reach. If I don't come back, don't follow, just let it go. Some things aren't meant to be caught. I felt ice in my stomach. I grabbed the map, looked at the marked locations. He was right, there was a pattern. The sightings clustered between 2 specific bridges, about 5 miles apart in the lower Keys. And they all showed the sedan heading south toward Key West. I called his sergeant, reported Marcus missing. Search teams went out, checked his last known location based on his patrol logs. They found his cruiser on the bridge between Sugarloaf Key and Cudjoe Key, parked on the shoulder, lights off, no sign of Marcus. His radio was on his front seat, his service weapon was secured in its locker, his hat was on the passenger seat. Everything that should have been in the cruiser was there. Marcus wasn't. They searched the water, sent divers down, used sonar to scan beneath the bridge. They found nothing. No body, no clothing, no evidence that Marcus had gone into the water. It was like he'd stepped out of his cruiser and vanished. The investigation went on for weeks. They checked his apartment again, his bank records, his phone logs, interviewed his family, his friends, other troopers. No one had any idea where he'd gone or why. He hadn't been depressed, hadn't been in trouble, hadn't shown any signs of wanting to disappear. He'd just been investigating the white sedan, trying to understand it, and then he was gone. I knew what had happened. I knew without being able to prove it or explain it. Marcus had followed the sedan, had gotten too close, had crossed some line that shouldn't be crossed. And now he was wherever the sedan was when it wasn't visible on our roads. Somewhere between the bridges, somewhere in that space where things disappear. I stopped patrolling the Keys after that. Requested a transfer, got assigned to the mainland. Told my sergeant I couldn't handle the isolation of island patrol, the long stretches with no backup. He understood, approved the transfer without question. But the truth was, I couldn't handle knowing that Marcus was out there somewhere, trapped in a pursuit that never ended, following a vehicle that couldn't be caught. I couldn't handle the thought that every time I drove between those bridges, I might see him. Might see his cruiser, lights flashing, chasing something that would always be just ahead, always just out of reach. I still hear about sightings. Troopers talk, word spreads, and the white sedan is still seen regularly in the Keys. Still speeding, still without plates, still disappearing on bridges. But now there's something else too. Sometimes, late at night, troopers report seeing 2 vehicles, the white sedan in front, and behind it a Florida Highway Patrol cruiser, lights flashing, maintaining pursuit. The cruiser has Marcus's unit number, the same number he was driving the night he disappeared. And when troopers try to catch up, try to help with the pursuit, both vehicles vanish. Just disappear into the darkness between bridges, into that space where the road exists but doesn't, where vehicles drive but never arrive. I don't know if Marcus is aware of what's happened to him. Don't know if he's conscious in that cruiser, forever chasing something he'll never catch, or if he's just an echo, a shadow, a residual pattern of pursuit that plays out night after night in the Keys. I hope he's not aware. I hope he's somewhere else, somewhere better, and what we're seeing is just the ghost of that night. The moment when he got too close and crossed over into whatever space the white sedan exists in. But I suspect he is aware. Suspect he's still there, still chasing, still determined to understand and catch and solve the mystery that cost him everything. Still a trooper, still doing the job, even though the job will never end. That's what happens when you pursue something that doesn't follow normal rules. When you chase something that exists between spaces, between moments, between the road you can see and the road that's hidden. You get caught in the pursuit. You become part of it. You join the endless chase that plays out in the dark hours between the islands, on bridges that span water deep enough to hide anything. I see the reports sometimes, forwarded through the department network. White sedan sighted, Keys area. Pursuing unit unable to apprehend. And I know what really happened. I know that somewhere between Big Pine and Key West, on bridges that connect islands that barely hold on to existence themselves, Marcus is still out there. Still chasing the white sedan. Still trying to solve the mystery. Still trapped in a pursuit that will never end, on roads that exist in multiple places at once. Driving through darkness that's deeper than just the absence of light. And the white sedan is still ahead of him, always ahead, always just out of reach. Still running without lights, still turning corners that aren't there, still disappearing into that space where vehicles go when they leave our sight and never come back. I don't patrol the Keys anymore. Don't drive those bridges unless I absolutely have to, because I know what's out there. And I know that if I see the white sedan, if I try to pursue it, I'll end up like Marcus. I'll cross that line between here and wherever the sedan goes when it vanishes. I'll become part of the eternal pursuit, another light in the darkness, another trooper who got too close to something that shouldn't be chased. Some things are meant to remain mysteries. Some vehicles are meant to speed past and disappear and never be caught. Some roads lead to places we're not supposed to go, and some pursuits end not with an arrest or an accident, but with a disappearance that can never be explained.